This happened about a year ago. I'm Mark, and I thought a weekend trip with my 3 best friends would be fun. We wanted to escape the noise of the city. The farmhouse we found was old and creaked a lot. When we arrived on Friday evening, it felt peaceful. But that didn't last long. At first, everything seemed normal. We unpacked our bags and made dinner. We shared drinks and laughed. But when night fell, things changed. We found a locked attic door. It looked ancient and strange. We debated whether to open it. The air was thick with tension. In the end, we left it alone. I thought I heard some thumping from above us. Maybe it was just the plumbing. I told myself that, but I felt uneasy. The next day, things got stranger. I remember sitting with my friends, chatting, when I saw a shadow move past the window. I pointed it out, but my friends shrugged it off. I felt cold air for a moment. I was scared. Felt wrong. Like something was watching us. Later that night, I had a dream. I still remember it clearly. There was a girl in my dream, calling for help. I woke up in a cold sweat. The dread wouldn't leave me. I didn't tell my friends about the dream. But the next morning, I noticed they looked just as tense as I felt. We tried to push through the worry. But tensions rose. One friend wanted to leave. He wouldn't stop talking about that attic door. We seemed pulled in different directions. I wanted to stay, but I was scared too. The lights flickered sometimes. I'd hear footsteps when I was alone. I whispered to them, "Do you feel that?" They didn't say much, but I knew they sensed it too. Later, we decided to explore outside. The backyard was overgrown and wild, with tall grass swaying in the wind. I felt like we were in a different world. While walking, I noticed something on the ground. It looked like a broken doll. My heart raced. I picked it up. Felt cold in my hands. Nobody else seemed to care. I tossed it aside, but a feeling of dread washed over me as night fell. The farmhouse felt even creepier. We gathered in the living room. I noticed the light flicker again and heard the thumps from above. I glanced at my friends. They looked scared. I brought up the attic door again. "Should we check it?" I asked. They all hesitated. My friend responded, "What if we find something bad?" I didn't know what to say, so we changed the subject. But the tension hung heavy in the air. We decided to go to bed early. I lay awake, listening to creaks and distant thumps. By the end of our trip, we didn't open the attic door. We packed our bags, feeling unsettled. Were we imagining things? I wondered if there was something waiting for us up there. As we drove away, a knot formed in my stomach. I still think about that weekend often. Those questions linger. What was really up there? I can't help but wonder. The weeks passed after that weekend, but the memories didn't fade. The farmhouse loomed large in my thoughts, like a dark cloud. My friends and I kept in touch, sharing our feelings about the trip. But we avoided mentioning the attic. It was as if we had all agreed not to talk about it. One evening, I was at home when I got a text from Jake, one of the guys who went with us. "We need to talk," it read. I felt my heart quicken. I replied, "About what?" "A weird feeling." That was all he said. I met him the next day at our favorite coffee shop. His face was pale, eyes darting around like he was searching for something unseen. "I've been thinking about that farmhouse," he began, his voice shaky. "I can't shake this feeling that we missed something important." "Like what?" I asked, the pit in my stomach growing. "That girl in your dream," he said hesitantly. "What if she's connected to the attic?" I gulped. Felt unsettling to hear. "You think we should go back?" I asked. He hesitated. "I don't know, but I can't think straight. Can we ask the others?" We contacted the other 2, Sarah and Tom. They were hesitant at first, but eventually, they agreed to return for a day. We decided on the following weekend. I spent the whole week restless, replaying every detail of that trip. Driving back to the farmhouse felt different. I scanned the wild, overgrown yard as we approached. The house looked even more imposing than before. This time, the old door creaked open as we stepped inside. The familiar smell of dust and mildew filled the air. "Feels eerie," Sarah said, looking around. I nodded, feeling the weight of tension settle over us again. We explored the rooms, avoiding the attic door like it was a live wire. After searching the first floor, we gathered in the living room again. Do we go up this time? Tom asked, glancing nervously at the attic door. I think we should, Jake said firmly. My heart raced. We can't keep avoiding it. Reluctantly, we agreed. As we climbed the creaking stairs, the cold air wrapped around us. The door loomed ahead. I reached for the knob, fingers trembling. What if it's really bad? I whispered. Then we'll deal with it together, Jake assured me, though his voice was tense. We stood in front of the door for a moment, the silence deafening. Then I turned the knob. The door swung open, revealing a dark room filled with old furniture covered in sheets. I was about to step in when I saw something in the corner. A figure. A doll. Just like the one I had found outside last time. I felt my breath hitch in my throat. Guys, I said slowly, I think we should leave. Just then, everything went dark. The lights in the house flickered and then cut out entirely. We were plunged into darkness, with only the faint outline of the attic room visible. Mark? Jake's voice trembled. What's happening? I swallowed hard. I thought I saw a shadow move across the room. The air felt electric. Then, a whisper echoed through the silence. Help me. Did I just imagine it? Or was that the girl from my dream? I couldn't shake the chilling whisper as it hung in the air. It felt more than a figment of my imagination. Did you hear that? I whispered, trying not to panic. Jake's breath hitched next to me. Yeah, I heard it, he replied. What do we do? Maybe we should call for help, Tom suggested. His voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head. No service out here. Remember? The truth settled heavily in my stomach. If something was wrong, we were on our own. Sarah's voice trembled, breaking the oppressive silence. What if we just turn on our phone lights? We can't stay in the dark. I fumbled for my phone, the familiar weight a small comfort. I turned on the flashlight, and the beam flickered weakly, illuminating the dusty attic. The doll loomed larger now, its glassy eyes seeming to follow us with an unnerving intensity as the light swept across the room. I saw something else. A small wooden trunk halfway hidden under a moth-eaten sheet. What's that? I asked, pointing. I don't like this, Sarah said, her voice shaky. Should we really be looking around? We have to, don't we? Jake replied. He stepped closer to the trunk, his light revealing strange symbols carved into its sides. What do you think it is? Tom asked, glancing back at the door as if it might close on us. I didn't want to think about it. The idea of opening that trunk terrified me, but curiosity nagged at my mind. Let us just look. Okay? We can see what's inside and then leave. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. I knelt beside the trunk, felt the rough wood under my fingers. My heart raced, and I couldn't help glancing back at the attic door. I could feel the darkness pressing in. Mark, please don't open it, Sarah pleaded, her tone filled with fear. Just a peek, I promised, more to myself than to her. I lifted the lid slowly. Inside were faded photographs and letters, all fragile and yellowed with time. But something caught my eye, a piece of paper with neat handwriting. I pulled it out, heart pounding. It was a note, a message of some kind. The girl cries for help. I read aloud, my voice echoing off the attic walls. She wants to be free. A chill washed over us. The weight of the words sank in. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from downstairs. It felt like an explosion, reverberating through the house. We jumped back, the flashlight beam shaking wildly. What was that? Tom gasped. Maybe it's just the wind, Jake suggested, though the tremor in his voice betrayed him. The air grew heavier, charged with something I couldn't quite explain. I felt a pull toward the attic door, an urge to flee, but also a need to know what was happening. That wasn't the wind, I said, shaking my head. We need to get out of here. Now. Just as I stood up, I noticed something move in my periphery. I turned quickly to find the doll was no longer in the corner. It was gone. My heart dropped. Where's the doll? The whisper returned, louder this time. Help me. Panic seized us as I felt the walls of the attic close in. It was time to leave, but I felt we were already too late. I took a step back, my mind racing. The doll's absence twisted something in my gut, a feeling of dread spiraled deeper. "We have to go," I hissed. The urgency in my voice seemed to electrify the air. Jake glanced toward the door. What if the noise downstairs was just a raccoon or something? But I could sense something was off. "No, I don't want to stick around to find out." Then, almost as if answering my fears, a soft creak came from the corner of the attic, followed by a faint rustling. I turned, praying it was just the wind, but the darkness seemed to shift unnaturally. Sarah clutched Jake's arm. "We need to get out of here," she urged, her voice quavering. Tom's eyes darted around. What if the doll is alive or something? Maybe it went downstairs. I shook my head. "Doesn't matter. If anything is down there, I don't want to find out." I could feel fear tightening in my chest, but I couldn't ignore the pull of that note. "We can't leave yet. We need to understand what's happening." "Mark, please," Sarah pleaded, her doubt evident. "This is insane." Just then, the whisper returned, wrapping around us like a cold breeze. "Help me." It felt like a voice from the depths of a nightmare, a call for assistance that chilled my bones. I hesitated, torn between the desperate need to leave and an inexplicable urge to help. There's clearly something wrong here. What does she want? Jake took a deep breath. Maybe we should all just shout for help, someone might hear us. Or we could attract whatever's up here. I shot back, unease creeping back into my thoughts. Tom slowly moved toward the staircase. "How about we at least look downstairs together?" he said quietly. "We can't just leave now." Before I could respond, something fell from a shadowed corner, hitting the floor with a dull thud. Heart racing, I swung the flashlight toward the sound. A simple toy, a tiny wooden boat, lay upside down, dust swirling around it as it settled. "Is that?" Jake started, stepping forward. "Why is it up here?" Tom asked, his voice apprehensive. "It doesn't belong in an attic." Every nerve in my body screamed at me to turn and run, but I was rooted to the spot. That wooden boat felt wrong, like another piece of a puzzle that was better left unsolved. I glanced at the trunk, its contents still hauntingly clear in my mind. "Maybe we should just take the trunk too," I suggested, trying to sound casual. There might be more information about the girl. But before we could decide, a thud resounded from the floor below. It was heavier this time, like someone or something was moving around down there. "We have to get out now," Sarah shouted, her voice breaking. There was nothing else to do. The whispers, the doll, the boat, it was all twisting together into something darker. I turned toward the attic door, fear pulling at my throat. As we rushed towards it, the finality of the situation hit me. I grabbed the door handle, ready to push it open when a shadow darted past my flashlight. "Did you see that?" I gasped, stopping mid-motion. "Go!" Jake shouted, urgently pushing me forward. But I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was down there was waiting for us. The door creaked slowly in response, my heart pounding harder with every second that passed. I pushed the door open, my heart racing, ready to leap into the hallway. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing empty spaces and old, peeling wallpaper. The air felt thick, almost oppressive, as if the house itself were holding its breath. I barely took a step when the flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows across the walls. "Mark, hurry up," Sarah urged, her voice tight with fear. I could hear her breathing quicken behind me. Tom squeezed past me, eyes wide. "We can't stay here. We need a plan." As I swung the beam around, the light landed on the staircase leading down. A deep, hollow sound echoed from that direction, almost like a reply to our fear. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Guys, we should really think about this," I said, barely keeping my voice steady. "Think about what?" Jake replied sharply. "We're already in way too deep." Suddenly, I noticed the wooden boat again. It lay there mocking me, a sign of something I couldn't yet understand. "Wait," I said, "what if it's connected? The doll, the boat. Maybe they're part of some story." "Story or not, I don't want to find out," Sarah said, her eyes darting around, searching for something that could help us make sense of the chaos. "Maybe we should try to find another way out?" Tom suggested, glancing back at the attic door. Downstairs, I said, blood rushing in my ears. We checked downstairs, but stick together. No splitting up. With a collective nod, we moved toward the staircase, the wooden steps creaking under our weight. Every step felt like an eternity, the shadows creeping along the walls as if they were alive. Finally, we reached the bottom, where the hallway opened into darkness. The thudding had stopped, replaced by a heavy silence. It felt like the house was watching us. I turned to the others. Stay close. Shine your flashlights ahead and watch each other's backs. I took the lead, casting my beam ahead into the void, revealing nothing more than faint outlines of furniture and deep, unsettling shadows. The whisper returned, then faint, urgent. Help me. I froze, gripping my flashlight tightly. Did you guys hear that? I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. Hear what? Jake whispered back, his brow furrowed. Don't freak out. I hissed, taking a step forward. It had said help. Something wants us to go deeper. As I strained to listen, receiving no reply, the room suddenly felt colder. I thought I saw movement at the corner of my eye, the silhouette of a figure crawling through the shadows. Mark, Sarah gasped, cutting through my panic. What was that? I swung my flashlight toward the left, illuminating an open door that led into another room. It wasn't there a moment ago. The cold air rushed out toward us, inviting and chilling all at once. That's new, Tom said, narrowing his eyes at the threshold. What do we do now? Do we go inside? Jake asked, swallowing hard. Before I could answer, a soft crash echoed down the hall. I jumped, the noise like a cue to panic. We don't have much time, I said. I think we need to go in. As we approached the door together, a loud, shattering sound erupted from behind us, instantly turning our attention. A window had burst open on its own, letting a gust of wind flood in. With adrenaline surging, I turned back to the door. Then everything went dark. The flashlight blinked and died, plunging us into an inky blackness. I fumbled with the flashlight, desperately banging it against my palm. Nothing happened. Panic clawed at my chest. It felt like the darkness was swallowing us whole, taking away any chance of escape. Mark, where are you? Sarah's voice quivered. Right here. I responded, but suddenly felt unsure. The air was thick. I had to keep it together. I stepped forward, guided by the muted sounds of the others shifting nervously behind me. I felt my heart hammering in my ears. Is there a way we can, I don't know, make it work again? Tom whispered, his voice trembling slightly. I can try, I said, reaching into my pocket for the spare batteries. My hands shook as I switched them out. It felt like an eternity, and behind me, I could hear shallow breaths. Okay, on 3, I'll turn it back on, I said. 1, 2. Suddenly, a loud crash reverberated through the hallway. The sound of something heavy hitting the ground echoed, cutting through the silence like a knife. Go, I shouted, and even as I said it, I wasn't sure where to go. Instinctively, I turned toward the doorframe with the cold air. We needed answers. We needed to know what was inside. The flashlight flickered to life, illuminating the room. The first things I noticed were scattered pieces of old furniture draped in dust, and then the chilling sight of a childish doll perched on a chair, its glassy eyes reflecting the light. That I took a step back, heart pounding. What the hell is that? I stuttered. It looks like it's been waiting for us, Jake murmured, voice laced with dread. A movement caught my eye. The door creaked wider, beckoning us in. The darkness behind it felt less inviting now, almost suffocating. Is it just me? Or is something really off about that doll? I asked, trying to break the tension. Let us not touch it, Sarah urged, but I could see her curiosity had also been piqued. The doll seemed out of place, too perfect for the decrepit room. As we huddled together, a chilling realization washed over me. What if it's not the only thing in here? I whispered, wishing I could take back the words as soon as they left my mouth. Suddenly, from somewhere deeper within the house, another whisper floated through the air. Help me. The voice sounded clearer this time and undeniably human. Goosebumps grazed my skin, and I felt a tremor in my hands. Did you hear that? I breathed. Yes. We have to get out of here, Sarah said, looking more fragile than ever. Ignoring the distance to the exit, I grasped Sarah's hand and led her forward, my group standing behind me. The chill intensified, wrapping around my throat like a noose. As we reached the threshold, the door slammed shut behind us with a deafening bang. I spun around, heart racing as shadows danced across the wall. What just happened? Jake's voice broke, panic seeping through. Before I could respond, the walls seemed to breathe, shifting like the house itself had come alive. I opened my mouth to suggest retreat, but more whispers filled the air louder this time. "Help us!" They echoed in a ghastly harmony. That was when I saw it standing in the corner, barely illuminated by my flashlight, a shadowy figure with outstretched hands. My breath caught, and all thoughts of escape fled. We weren't alone. The figure loomed closer, its features indistinguishable in the dim light. My gut twisted. A surge of fear coursed through me, and I felt an overwhelming urge to run. But my feet felt glued to the floor while the whispers grew louder, swirling around us like a storm. "Mark, what do we do?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide with terror. I didn't have an answer. The flashlight flickered again, dimming as if it too sensed the dread hanging in the air. "We can't stay here," I mumbled, finally finding my voice. I turned to the others, desperate for support. "We need a plan. What if it comes after us?" Jake stammered, his back pressed tightly to the wall, as if he could disappear into the cracks. "Whatever that is, it's not friendly," Tom added, looking more shaken than I had ever seen him. I had to make a choice. Retreat or confront whatever that was. I gripped the flashlight tighter, its beam still struggling against the darkness. I took a small step forward, heart pounding, forcing myself to look directly at the figure. It seemed to hesitate, its form wavering like a mirage. "Listen," I started, my voice steadying. "We need to find a way out. If we work together." Before I could finish, the figure lunged forward, a horrible scream echoing through the room. Instinct kicked in, adrenaline flooding my veins. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Sarah's arm and yanking her toward the door we had just come through. The door, however, stood firm now, as if something held it shut. I bashed my shoulder against it, panic rising. "It's stuck!" I exclaimed. Behind us, the whispers coalesced into a cacophony of pleas. "Help us! Help us! Stop it!" I yelled into the shadows, but it felt futile. I kept banging on the door, desperation fueling my strength. The sounds were closing in, echoing so loud it rattled my thoughts. "We have to push." The four of us grouped together, leaning against the door as we shoved all at once. With a hefty bang, the door jolted open. We stumbled through the threshold, tumbling out into the hallway. As we caught our breath, I turned back where we had come from and saw nothing but empty air. The shadowy figure had vanished, but the whispers lingered, wrapping around my mind. "We need a way out of this place," I said, urgency colored in my voice. The tension was thick, and I could feel everyone's dread settling in like a heavy cloud. As we hurried down the hallway, we reached a staircase that spiraled downward. I felt an instinctive dread wash over me. "Do we really want to go down there?" I asked, hesitating. "Anything is better than staying up here," Sarah replied, glancing nervously over her shoulder. With no other options, we made our way down the creaking steps. With each descent, the air grew colder, and the whispers seemed to dance around us, growing fainter yet more unnerving. At the bottom, we were greeted by a dimly lit room filled with things I couldn't even make out properly. But one thing was clear: a single dusty mirror hung on the wall, its surface oddly polished among the wreckage. As I approached the mirror, whispers swelled up again. "Find us! Find us!" I turned back to the others, fear clawing at my throat. What if that thing was trying to lead us here? I stepped closer, drawn to the glimmering surface. When I noticed a shadow looming behind me in the mirror. Suddenly, I didn't want to turn around, but I had to. I forced myself to turn slowly, my breath catching in my throat. Behind me stood nothing but empty air, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been there, watching. My heart raced. I couldn't let fear control me. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. See what? Tom replied, his brow furrowed, anxiety etched on his face. Nothing, never mind, I replied, shaking my head, but the unease settled deeper into my bones. The whispers grew louder, echoing off the walls, a haunting chorus that felt alive. We have to stay focused, I urged, trying to keep my voice steady despite the tension rising in the room. Let us check around, Jake suggested, sidestepping towards some broken furniture. That was a distraction I welcomed. Maybe there's something useful here. We began to rummage through the haphazardly scattered items. Tattered books, old toys, and dusty crates. I recalled the eerie sensation in the mirror and strained to listen. The whispers still permeated the air like an unsettling breeze. But now they seemed to be coming from different directions. When I focused on one corner, they grew fainter in another. It was disorienting. Then Sarah called out, I found something. She stood at the far end of the room, holding up a small, intricately carved box that appeared old and worn. My instincts screamed for caution, but curiosity pulled me toward her. Is it locked? I asked, hovering near. She tried to open it, and the lid creaked as it gave way. Inside, we found several faded photographs. Each image showed faces of individuals, all with terrified expressions, looking as if they had just escaped from something dreadful. My stomach turned. Who are these people? I murmured. Maybe they're the ones in the whispers, Tom suggested, glancing at each face. They look like they're begging for help. I took a deep breath, catching the edge of Sarah's sweater to steady myself. What if they're trapped? Like we are? Suddenly, the air shifted, and the temperature dropped. I could see our breath misting before us like ghosts escaping. We need to find a way out of here, I urged. Just then, a loud crack echoed from above us, the sound of wood splintering. We all froze, eyes darting to the ceiling. Is someone up there? Jake whispered, fear threading through his voice. I don't think we should stick around to find out, I said, a sense of urgency pulsing through me. With the mirror still haunting my thoughts, I grabbed the photographs from Sarah and shoved them into my pocket. Let us go back up. We need to find another way out. As we hurried back toward the stairwell, I could feel the shadows closing in. The whispers intensified, more desperate. Help us! Help us! They echoed louder, drowning out my thoughts. Just before I reached the staircase, I turned again. The mirror caught my eye one last time. Reflected in its polished surface were those same faces, now twisted with agony. They weren't just trapped, they were warning us. Run! I shouted. The moment I turned, I could feel something surge from the depths of the room, a force drawing me back. I bolted up the stairs, but fear gripped my heart as I heard the whispers transform into anguished screams. We had to get out, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was behind that mirror wasn't finished with us. Chapter 4. The shadows of the past. I sprinted up the stairs, urgency driving my every step. Tom, Sarah, and Jake followed closely, but I could sense something looming behind us. The air crackled with tension, and the whispers became a chaotic cacophony of screams as we climbed. Each step felt heavier, like the old house was pulling us back. We burst into the hallway at the top of the stairs, panting. We have to find a way out of here, I said, scanning the dimly lit corridor. The light flickered, casting eerie shadows that twisted like fingers reaching for us. Where do we go now? Jake asked, his voice barely a whisper. I could see the panic in his eyes, matching my own. Let us try one of the doors, Sarah suggested, pointing to a heavy wooden door at the end of the hall. It looked sturdy but old, with rusted hinges and a tarnished handle that seemed to beckon us closer as we approached. I glanced back down the staircase. For a fleeting moment, I thought I saw a dark shape lingering at the bottom, almost human in form. I shook my head, trying to dispel the image, but it lingered. Where is Tom? I asked suddenly. I turned to see him standing a few steps back, staring wide-eyed at the empty hallway behind us. Tom, I called, my voice sharp with concern. He snapped back to the present. Did you see that? He asked, his voice trembling. There was someone down there. My heart raced, but I forced myself to remain calm. It's just the shadows. We need to get moving." Tom nodded, but I could see he didn't fully believe it. We all gathered at the door, and Jake gave it a hard push. It creaked open, revealing a small, dust-covered room. Shelves lined the walls, cluttered with glass jars filled with unknown substances and faded labels. The air reeked of something sour and stale. "Is this a lab?" Sarah wondered aloud, stepping cautiously inside. A chill ran through me as I scanned the jars, my eyes landing on a few filled with disturbing specimens. I felt like we had stumbled into a place best left forgotten. "Let us not touch anything," I urged, edging further into the room. When I noticed a large, ornate mirror hanging on the wall opposite the door. My pulse quickened as I approached it, memories of the first mirror flooding back. I couldn't resist. I had to look. The moment I did, a wave of nausea crashed over me. Reflected in the glass were not just my own frightened eyes, but the faces from the photographs twisted with anguish and pleading. The air seemed to hum, vibrating against my skin. I stumbled back, bumping into Jake. "What's wrong?" he asked, alarmed. "Those faces. They're in the mirror again," I managed to say, my voice shaky. I turned to run, but before I could reach the door, it slammed shut. Panic surged through me, and I pounded on the heavy wood. "Let us out," I cried, but it didn't budge. The whispers began again, louder than before, filling the room with an otherworldly chorus. "Help us," they cried in unison. The glass in the jars rattled, and I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. A shadow passed over the mirror, dark and looming. "We're not alone," Tom whispered, his voice barely audible above the rising storm of cries. And then, as suddenly as it began, everything went silent. The room fell into a suffocating stillness. I pressed my palms against the door, heart racing. "Do you hear that?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. We all listened, terrified, as a low growl echoed from deep within the walls. I realized we hadn't just stumbled into an abandoned home. We had walked into something much darker. The air thickened with dread, and I felt it again, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. But this time I was certain. Whatever haunted this place knew we were here. I could sense its presence creeping closer. "Something's coming," I said, my breaths quickening, and just as the whispers returned, a shadow emerged from the corner of the room. I finally understood. Whatever was behind that mirror wasn't finished with us yet. The room shuddered, and I could feel the walls closing in around us. The whispers morphed into screams, echoing through my mind as I struggled to comprehend what was happening. "We need to break down the door," Jake shouted, panic seeping into his words. I backed up, adrenaline coursing through my veins as the shadow inched closer. I felt Sarah grip my arm tightly. I could sense her fear buoying the tension in the air. "Together," I urged. "On 3. 1, 2." The cacophony of the shadows grew louder, a symphony of anguish that gripped at my heart. 3. We hurled ourselves at the door. It groaned against our collective force, hesitating for a moment before finally giving way. We stumbled into the hallway, gasping for breath, desperate for escape. The screams faded to frantic whispers behind us, but they still gnawed at my mind. I could feel them, the souls trapped inside those jars, begging for help. "Where now?" Tom panted, his eyes darting down both ends of the corridor. It twisted like a labyrinth, shadows whispering promises and threats alike. I hesitated, grappling with remnants of fear and uncertainty. "Let us try the back door," I suggested. "We came in the front. There has to be a way out." We sprinted down the hallway, my heart racing as strange flashes of movement danced in the corners of my vision. I refused to look back at the mirrors or the darkness. I could already feel the weight of its presence tightening like a noose around my neck. We reached a heavy door at the end of a corridor, its surface marred by age but still standing firm. A hint of hope bubbled in my chest. "This has to be it," I said, placing my hand on the handle. Just as I turned it, the whispers returned, urgent and jarring. "Help us. Not now." I screamed at the door, burying my fears deep. I shoved it open, and we tumbled outside into the sunlit air, gasping for breath. We found ourselves in the overgrown garden from our first visit, the farmhouse looming ominously behind us. For a moment, all felt right, the breezy warmth calming my racing heart. Yet, that peace shattered when I noticed something odd. The doll I had discarded earlier was sitting on the steps of the farmhouse, waiting as if it had a presence and a will of its own. "What the hell?" Jake exclaimed, staring agog at the doll. "How did it get there?" "I don't know, but we can't stay here," I said, pulling everyone backward. "We need to get away." We sprinted past the house, adrenaline fueling each step. I felt like something was chasing us, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was leaving pieces of myself behind in that cursed place. As we reached the edge of the property, I turned for one last look at the farmhouse, shadows flickering in the windows. "It's over," I whispered, filled with a mix of relief and lingering dread. But as we drove away, the sensation clawed back to me. The voices still echoed in my mind, demanding to be heard. They entwined with memories, shadows of the past lingering persistently. I glanced back at the farmhouse one last time. It stood silent, a ghost of its own making. Would it ever really be over? I didn't know if what we experienced was supernatural or just manifestations of our own fears. But whatever it was, I couldn't shake the feeling that our encounter was merely a taste of something deeper and darker. Days and weeks merged into a blur after we returned, but the questions haunted me. I still saw the faces in my dreams, the faces of those who had called out for help. The feeling of that doll's glassy eyes watching me remained gnawing in the back of my mind. Every time I spoke to my friends, the topic of that farmhouse hung heavy in the air. An unacknowledged weight. I moved on, but I couldn't escape my thoughts of that weekend. Sometimes, late at night, I would wonder if perhaps we should have stayed longer, if we should have searched deeper. Did we leave something behind? Is that dreaded girl still waiting? I guess I'll never know.